How can we make the world better? By making ourselves better. The Dr. Joe Show explores how you can make positive personal change by using his groundbreaking and highly effective I Am approach to understand who we are and why we do what we do. Your small changes can have big effects.
Join us now for the Dr. Joe Show with Mark Stiles of Stiles Law, Thomas McCoy, and your host, Dr. Joe Schrand.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Dr. Joe Show.
So I got a quick question, Mark. Was there a little bit of a frog in your throat?
Did you hear that?
Just a tad.
I cleared it as we were introducing it. Cleared.
Yeah, it was a new approach. I liked it. I liked it. But,
yes, I didn't do my my vocal exercises prior to going live here, so my apologies. It will never happen again, Dr. Joe.
So I've been towed. Get it? It's a fraud joke. I've been towed.
I did get it.
I wonder, Tom, if you could introduce our guests and where they're calling in from.
So, Dr. Joe, you went to the Galapagos, isn't that right?
It is so true. No man is an island, but boy, those islands were amazing.
And in your voyage, you made some connections, especially with the naturalists guiding you.
I did. The two naturalists who were guiding us were amazing. And I was hoping that maybe by some coincidence, they would actually show up here tonight.
Well, Dr. Joe, hold on to your seat, because we have arranged a very special reunion with Daniel and Bernardo Hakame, calling in from Ecuador. Isn't that right?
Yeah. Welcome, guys. It's incredible. How are you both? Haven't seen you in months.
Hey, Joe.
Hey.
So Danny, you're in Ecuador. And Bernie, where are you actually right now? Where are you?
Yeah, I'm in Quito right now. I came from the Galapagos yesterday.
Okay. And Bernie, where are you right now?
I'm in the Galapagos.
So I don't know whether people quite understand what the Galapagos represents right now in the world. Bernie, you've been doing naturalist work for some time. Do you want to just tell us a little bit about the Galapagos and why people may want to visit there?
In general, the Galapagos, being so pristine as it actually ends up being, it's also a nice representation of how we human beings have pretty much affected or sort of molded up some of the places that were already before, as shaped by geology and at some point, colonized by many species of plants. That's something you can still say in the Galapagos because of how early the human being inhabitation has happened around here. So I think that's a good way, to sort of release stress, and get to find yourself because being outside with nature, taking, a good chance to release, stress probably, or just to hang around. It's a beautiful place too, a beautiful landscape, so many animal species. I think that those things are pretty cool, and the national park still protects them so much. And they're really strict at some point. Makes it also quite a cool place, to be hanging around that and to be living in it. Also makes it really special, yeah.
I think that is such an important part of what this is it is this part of the world where a human being can go and just, for me, it was just a marvel to be with and so close to other animals, other species, and they weren't afraid of us. That was really fascinating. So can you just tell us a little bit about what we saw? Because I was there, but there's no way I can describe the different birds, the lizards, the sea lions. Do you remember where we went and what we saw? And I know we've got a couple of our other folks who were on the tour with us. Catherine Graham is called in. Lisa Volpe is in there. They may all be sending us some questions too. So, Dani, you tell us a little bit about yourself. So, Dani, tell us about you being a naturalist. Go ahead.
For me, it's quite a new thing. I did the same course, naturalist course, with Bernie around 4 years ago. But the problem was that I didn't understood, like, learn a lot of things in like classes and theory and stuff. It was super nice, but I returned to like Quito, Ecuador, to continue my studies. I was finishing university. So yes, for me it was like, okay, yeah, I learned lots of things in the Galapagos, but I never was able like to fully put some practice on it, and for me it was difficult. I mean, I just came like, let's say, 1 month a year to work in the Galapagos in land, so very close to the town, and I wasn't able to see all of the things we actually saw with you. For me, it was as well like not a really new experience, but yes, it was much better than just being around town. So yes, for me it was quite a new thing. Remember I told you this. I'm very lucky because my dad is a naturalist. Our grandfather is a naturalist. So yeah, I've been very lucky and related to the islands like crazy all my life. But just to get the chance to go with Bernie and with you guys, that was amazing. And for me, it was the best way for me to learn and actually be around and see everything, and to understand what I've been reading like crazy, and to see the different aspects of the same animals you can get to see on town at some point. But yes, on nature and very far away in different islands. Remember, the Galapagos, most of them islands are very similar. They have the same animals, but they are very different from each other. So it is super interesting when you watch closely. And that for me was kind of my experience with that.
Yeah, I do think that the Galapagos, even though it seems like their species may be the same, the islands themselves are so different.
In fact, yes, at some point, that sort of relation that people always try to find, between human beings, and probably animals or nature. It's pretty interesting, it's actually very handy, because it actually helps us understanding, more than how can they, be so similar to human beings, how we are actually a bunch of animals, and at some point, I believe that probably our minds, our brains have allowed us to develop some weapons that have probably overcome, the idea of just being animals, competing, for territory, females, space, or whatever, because of the amount of things that we can create, because of the creative brain that we actually have. We have created so many different weapons, so many different ways, of showing power probably towards different people, towards different communities. And at some point, that has allowed us to, once again, fall into killing people, and stuff, At some point, probably human beings, fought for territory by using jiu-jitsu or by wrestling, and that would barely kill, a human being or another human being. I think that's what makes the difference, why we human beings do really kill each other and things like that, I would say. But no, nobody talks about that necessarily on the guides courses, I believe. No, I don't remember that. Yeah, but it's a really good question.
Yeah, it is remarkable how human beings have constructed all these weapons of war, but also all these remarkable things that we can explore with, like even the boats we were on. I wonder, Bernie, can you just describe what it's like to be on a boat for you for so long?
It's pretty interesting. It's kind of at some point you can really feel kind of lonely, but then again, it's always hanging around with animal species. It's hanging around the crew members, who at some point become kind of your family. Since I'm kind of like the youngest, I like to call them uncles. No, just kidding. But at some point, yes, they become your family, and always meeting new people kind of like refreshes that feeling of getting to go out. At some point, probably just 8 days, seems like a very short time. just to get to meet somebody, you know, and then you have to say goodbye, and you know, it can be demanding, at least mentally. I would say I think that's the most demanding part. Yeah, actually, the personal relations, but it's still all kind of cool, you know, and everything is always new. So I think that's kind of like cool, you know, to be on a ship, you know. First of all, the idea of being on a ship. Then, you know, I never necessarily got seasick, but I believe that it can be, you know, quite a struggle for people who are not necessarily used to, or they haven't developed their sea legs. We can tell. I mean, yeah.
Yeah, some people definitely had a difficult time with it. Danny's laughing because he may have experienced that himself.
And he has to dose himself, like.
So can you just? People may not actually know where the Galapagos Islands are. Can you just tell us where they are and what we know about them?
Just to let you know, they are located, you know, the closest island to the Galapagos is located 600 miles, you know, away from the mainland equator. The closest piece of land to them would be actually towards the north, you know, that would be the Cocos Islands, an archipelago from Costa Rica, and that's like 450 kilometers away from the northest island of the Galapagos. So it's actually a very remote island. You know, what makes also the Galapagos so special is that it's basically a bunch of volcanoes, you know, massive mountains that go all the way, you know, more than 2 miles, you know, underwater. Having, you know, so because of it being located on a tropical part of the world, you know, so close to the equator, you can actually that tropical kind of like island vibe, you know, being hit by so many cool currents, you know, so many cold currents, you know, creating such an upwelling of nutrients makes it such a special place, you know, but that's because it's being so remote, you know, and gets, you know, pristine currents all the way from Australia, or pristine currents all the way from Antarctica, you know, and that's actually quite unique. So many cold waters, you may have noticed, but tropical climate still, you know, that contrast is what allows so many different species and weird species we found over here. Not many inhabitants to the Galapagos necessarily. I think that we are close to 50,000 in total. You can still feel that certain type of island vibe, you know, 50,000 spread, you know, into the different islands. But yeah, I mean, at some point, it's quite a special place, and you cannot necessarily become a Galapagos resident just because. That's what also makes it. Besides that, you know, kind of like a nice place to live at, because you have a guarantee that not necessarily it's going to have the exponential growth that most of the populations around the world do have, you know. So you can still guarantee yourself, you know, a certain type of island chill vibe, you know, to live in. Personally, talking about, you know, the idea of living in this place too, you know, perspectives for that, for the same statement, yeah.
And I hope people understand that the islands, there really aren't any humans on them, right? I mean, it's not like there are houses and electrical systems. I mean, these are the islands as they've been for hundreds of thousands of years.
It's literally 3%, you know, of the islands, of the territory of the islands, that it's actually inhabited by human beings, you know, or used by human beings, you know, including the visited sites that we go to, you know. So yeah, I mean, most of it is actually pristine. The only difference probably that Charles Darwin got to see from when he came over here, you know, to nowadays, would be just the amount of microplastic, the plastic pellets, but that about, and that's concerning. I know that's actually a really bad thing, but besides that, you know, it's like the same thing, you know, and it's because of how people have taken care of the place too.
Yeah, but that is true. I mean, we spent several times on each island just finding little pieces of plastic and picking them up and giving them to Danny or Bernie so that they could just be disposed of. So we have an influence. Remember, you control no one, you influence everyone. But boy, humans still have an influence from thousands and thousands of miles away. I mean, these little pieces of plastic just washing up on the shore. I've got a comment here in our chat from Scott Wellman, who's an amazing pediatrician. I was taken by the genius of evolution. We saw lots of waved albatross because they were in their nesting sites. What we did not see was albatross at sea, flying for days on end, using dynamic soaring techniques which humans can have adapting. we did see a lot of albatross. What other species did we see out there?
Well, we saw a bunch of birds. First, adding to Scott's comments, the fact that why we probably wouldn't have seen, albatrosses also kind of like diving or getting food straight out of the water. It's because they feed at night, and it's really hard to see them actually when they're doing it. That's the fact, that's the reason why we didn't see them also, adapting crazy diving or fishing techniques, But anyways, besides that, I mean, a massive amount of seabirds. We saw a massive amount of reptiles, seabirds like the boobies, boobies, funny name. We saw the albatrosses, we saw the seagulls, we saw I don't know if we got the chance to see the Galapagos hawk. We saw the owl.
Yeah, we saw a hawk. I got a picture of a hawk.
Yeah, that's true. We saw it was actually a great trip, some of those weeks. Did we see, I have a question, did we see hammerheads? We saw a few hammerheads probably from the surface, that's right, Danny?
Yeah, we saw hammerheads, huh?
Yeah, we saw a bunch of
very closely, huh?
Yeah, we didn't see, of course, in fact, many land mammals, but that's because, the possibilities or the chances for land mammals to have at some point arrived here, established in these islands, it's very low, that's why also no amphibians, they wouldn't have made it all the way here. But some marine mammals, the species were out and about. It was a great trip, actually, yeah. I remember, yeah. The seas were pretty rough, yeah, that's in fact true, but it was fun, yeah.
Yeah, there were some pretty rough seas there, that's for sure.
Loads of animals, yeah.
So, Danny, I want to come back to you for a minute. So, how long have you actually been doing this as a naturalist on your own?
On my own, well, actually, on my own, these last 2 weeks were my first ones by my own. I as well, like, I worked like a month ago as well with my father in a bigger boat where they will actually need 3 guides, naturalists. And I was one, my father was second one, and there was a friend of mine that was the third. So I was actually as well there, like working by myself with a group, but I was very lucky because before that I went with Bernie, then I got the chance to go with my father, and he like kind of like, if I didn't know anything, he told me something about the islands, or so for me to understand it and just to give you nice facts and very interesting things, because for me, I mean, it is like the Galapagos are not, as Darwin says, they're not so pretty, not until you look closely. So that's very important, I believe.
Yeah, that is true. The actual landscape, you wouldn't necessarily say, oh, this is a place that's beautiful to hang out. Although there was a couple of beaches that were absolutely amazing. Yeah. But there were lava fields. Each island, I think, had a different ecological character. And the animals there, even though they may have been similar, clearly had to adapt.
Bernie, what is a naturalist?
In fact, a naturalist would be, according to the perspective. Dr. Joe, for example, he probably has a certain perspective because of him being, the ears, to everything that the naturalist was saying. Then, the national park, would consider a naturalist more like a certain type of national park ranger, kind of, or the eyes for the national park, basically because we are hanging always around the visited sites, the visited area, so we can set type of monitor the island, from different flanks. So that's kind of like a useful part, probably, of the naturalists. And then after that, at some point we provide loads of information. Probably, it's also very helpful for us, to try to make germinate a certain type of seed, of conservationism on people's minds. That can be probably also a handy thing, because at some point people can, get donations, or at least, the national park fee that they pay on the entrance, can seem sort of worthful, or at least, projects that probably people didn't necessarily think about, but at least in those terms, I would believe that that's probably another handy use for being a guide. Then that's what I would say that a guide would be, like, or that would be the cool part of a guide. Then you, of course, you're there, to make sure people will not leave the trails, to make sure people will not hang around the nesting areas, or also, we sort of protect as people, are learning and as people are watching and staring at things, if you can make it funny, that can be, just the home run for everything. But at some point, we're there, to also take care of the area people are actually going, to explore. And it's a really cool place. That's why, I think that it's also necessary that we have guides, to avoid getting into damage, by the amount of people that would be at some point arriving to the Galapagos, going onto these kind of tours. I mean, I don't know if you could imagine, Joe, a trip, without a guide. I don't know.
Yeah, it was, as Scott has written in, it was essential having guides. This would not have been half the trip without them. And Gail Mack is writing in, I loved going out on the deck each morning, the deck of our boat, to see where we would land each day. That afternoon we came to that lava field, felt like landing on another planet. And so I really believe that we would not have gotten anywhere near the sort of educational experience. We wouldn't necessarily have appreciated what we were seeing were it not for Bernie and Dani sort of giving us that information and explain it. And remember, folks, you walk down these small, paths through different landscapes, and you need to be careful where you're walking, because you could literally step on a bird or a lizard or a sea lion, because it's their space, man. This is their place. I've got video, I'll post it on Facebook, of these two seals, this mother seal being followed by her infant seal. And we're just standing around, and it's clear that this mother is a little annoyed where one of us is standing and starts saying things. Basically, you're on my island, out of my way here. What kind of training goes into becoming a naturalist? Bernie, I mean, this doesn't just happen. What training do you need?
In order for you to become a naturalist, at some point, what me and Dani actually had to go through is first of all an initial exam, which would be the admission exam. In our case, because you don't have actually naturalist guide courses, that often. At some point, the last one, the one me and Dani did, was in 2017. The one before that one was in 2008. So it's not like it's an arranged thing, because not necessarily we don't need that big amount of naturalists. Anyways, first you take the admission exam, and in our case, more than 1,000 people applied for it, but only the best 180 grades would make it. It was an exam, that lasted actually for like 5 hours, I think it was, kind of like 4 hours, okay, maybe. It was actually a very difficult exam. When we took it, actually, when I finished it, I was like, I'm not gonna pass I'm not gonna make it into the course, never in the life. I did a good job of that exam. And at some point, I went back to Quito, to see even how things were going. And I got an email, and saying that my grade was 5.6 or kind of like that. I barely went above, the half, 5.6 out of 10. But anyways, it said that I was on the position 60 something, and I was like, what? And at some point, actually, I did a really bad job on that exam, but most of the people actually did the same, I made it, in the first 60 spots. And Dani made it on the first 20, I think. Yeah. It was hard. Anyways, after that, you get like these 6 months, of having, geology, biology, botanics. I got lots of the Galapagos. You also have human history, important things that you might probably need, for guiding. And actually, from all the papers that we've got, I have read, close to 40% of them. And I know that I'm still missing loads of information, but there was so much information, and not even 6 months was time good enough, to get to have it all in your brains. Then after that, we did 2-week internship, on a yacht or on a ship, and after that, they finally gave us, our guiding licenses. Yes, that's the training that people go through, in order to become a guide.
That's a lot of training. It was also what Carol says. I was also amazed by how the park manages the scheduling of small tour groups. We're most often the only boat or one of only two arriving at these pristine beaches on remote islands. So is that what it is? Is there some coordination of these boats and the tours?
Yeah. Coordination, well, at some point, the national park arranges, at the very beginning of the year, or actually they did it like once, 6 years ago, maybe a little bit more than 20 years ago, maybe. They set up itineraries, and at some point they gave different ships, the different islands, they have to be at different times of the day. For example, the visit sites that we were at, on a Tuesday, probably we were there with the cachalots on a Tuesday afternoon. We are there, every 15 days on the same spot because, it's the same route that we have to follow back and again and again and again. At some point, having close to 80 or a little bit more than 80 ships, doing the same things, in order for you to avoid crashing or hanging around with so many people at the same time, and to avoid also, the amount of people going and making so much, at some point, yes, disturbing so much very specific visit site at the same day, can be, a very handy thing, to make or haven't created these itineraries. So yes, that's the reason for that. Yes.
It was really remarkable to be on these islands with really nobody else there, and being on a beach with no footprints other than ours that we made. I'm curious. Mark had mentioned Origin of Species by Darwin. Do you guys, get taught about evolutionary process and what? I mean, maybe people don't really know anymore. What is evolution? Why were these islands so fascinating to Darwin? What was he seeing?
Well, at some point, Charles Darwin, evolution is explained, the following. At some point, evolution is just random mutations, in the sampling system of the DNA that might happen, because of the variance or chances that you have, for it might sound complicated. It's not that complicated, but the variance of DNA that you can have on the same population, might also drive you to diverge into different species or anyways, to cause random mutations in the sampling system. Those random mutations at some point will start, changing any actually behavioral or physical change that a species or an individual species, can have. And at some point that might trigger you to try to find your way in this world, kind of, more than necessarily trying to or developing something because I'm having to adapt to a place. It's more, now that I like this, and I have the weapons that I have, or the body that I have, the tools that I have. How do I make myself on this world, more than the opposite, kind of. That's what evolution at some point ends up being. And well, evolution is triggered, by also natural selection. Okay, natural selection is pretty much, how at some point some characteristics, prevail or overcome rather than other ones because of the environment the individuals might be living in, by the different causes of any disturbing thing,
Yes,
so mutations can be they're random, of course, but they can either be positive, negative, or neutral. At some point, I believe that it's pretty much how everything, is shaped, at least, into the living things in this world, more than how it's shaped, because it's shaped by geology but then the biology comes in, and that's how biology actually pretty much is, what is right now because of how it was at some point.
Yeah, and that's what Darwin was beginning to figure out was here are these here are these different but similar animals. Why do some have this kind of beak, some have that kind of beak? And he was really talking about the adaptation and how for some animals, having a longer beak meant you could catch this particular food, but shorter beaks, you would then catch other food. And that's part of what adaptation was really all about, adaptation and natural selection. And what's so cool about it is that we're still beginning to, we're changing our understanding of evolution. So Dani, you were talking about that off air. So evolution has traditionally been thought of as a very slow process, but we're rethinking that now. Is that right?
I'm not really sure if rethinking, but yes. Remember, I was telling you that the Galapagos are very harsh environments. They're changing like crazy all the time. So yes, the species need to adapt, not only like for a million years, but for even seasons. Remember, we told you about the seasons. We got the dry and cold season and the warm and wet season. These do create different like scenarios in the same year, very different situations in the same year. And remember, we got an El Niño year, which increases the wet and warm season with lots of more rains and stuff, but warms the seas a little bit and makes that the populations decrease, that the water will decrease a lot. And for example, the El Niño year as well, in the opposite case, will produce lots of nutrients in water, for example, making all the sea life, the sea lions, remember the blue-footed boobies, all thrive like crazy. But the birds who need like plants and things will start dying because there's not going to be enough rain or to feed those trees, and they have to adapt to very different, very, very strict conditions all the time. It's not that only after a million years. That is why they're changing, but you can clearly see how their offspring, kind of the average population changes between a season and especially on El Niño, which is very extreme, and El Niño year.
So what is it? What is El Niño? What is that?
That's when you get to lose all the winds, and you get like you're stuck with this huge amount of warm waters that will actually cause like all the problems actually in the U.S. as well. I had like there's hurricanes, the winds go crazy, and so it is a global thing, not only to the Galapagos, but El Niño is a very important thing. But especially, yes, mainly because of the warm waters that get stuck, the temperature increases like crazy. You will start having these hurricanes over there. We get these huge amounts of rain in the Galapagos, so everything as well. Remember the cactuses we saw in the Galapagos. They are used to of living in a very dry area, but when you give them like too much water, they as well will die. So everything is like it doesn't stabilize like that much.
That's right. And at some point, yes. Also, El Niño events, are so normal. It's like normal to have El Niño events. It's because, like, at some point, all the CO2 that we exhale, it's very common that everybody exhales CO2, that we human beings and animals, The only problem is that at some point we are overproducing CO2 in the atmosphere, and that's creating, El Niño events a little bit more often than usual. And what will happen at some point, having CO2 that is such a light gas going all the way to the atmosphere and causing so much weight also on the atmosphere, that will cause the depression. And also, what Dani said, the condensation process will not be helped because pretty much the clouds will be very close to the ground. And no, actually, it will start raining a lot because of that fact. the condensation process will actually happen a lot. And anyways, it gets really warm too, and that's also really good for the flowering and the blooming. But it would be a little bit bad for the marine species, pretty much because of the pressure of the atmosphere also going so low that will push down, the thermocline levels or the thermocline levels, which are the cold water currents in the ocean. That pushes them down a little bit, and that warms up a lot the surface of the sea. And for so, since the colder temperatures are a little bit heavier than the warmer temperatures, the cold temperatures will not necessarily hit the base of the volcanoes of all of these islands, and for so there will not happen an upwelling of nutrients. And for so, that's why the marine species struggle so much when we have so often El Niño events, when we're having, because as I said before, it's normal, but it's also, not that often, they happen so frequently. Yes.
Are they happening more frequently now, do you think? Because of global warming, climate change?
Probably. I mean, it would be normally, well, probably overpopulation also allows it a little bit, but no, we're also producing CO2, And yes, it should happen probably once every 70 years, but that's because of the accumulation that there will be of CO2 in the atmosphere. It's not normal that we accumulate so much, and that the atmosphere has to create this pressure, this counter pressure back again. That's what's not normal, and that's because we're producing CO2. That's pretty much
methane too.
So is that also part of why the Galapagos are so important? Because they do show us pretty clearly what the effect may be of climate change and global warming?
I hope that at some point you got a seed of concern, because yes, because of it being also so isolated, is that it becomes, such a fragile place. The variance of DNA over in the Galapagos is not that much. It's actually very reduced to a little bit, and that's why at some point a little disease, might kill the whole population of not only one but many families, also species. So yeah, I think that because of that fragility, we should concern a lot, and I hope that you have seen that, because it's all right if at some point, people have a perspective of life, as it being on a concrete jungle kind of, but it's also kind of like, I don't know, we should just be more aware, because there's so many different livings, that will be happening, around the world. And I believe that having, plastic that can travel so long distances, can be spread so much, could, or is a nice way of living, with, I don't know, it's something to be concerned of, Of course, consumism or those things can be harmful, but I don't know, we should figure out something. I hope that it added, some concern to people's lives. At least, out of the people that went on the cruise, that'd be awesome if people went a recycling idea or reusing or reducing the amount of plastics in our lives. That's like the main goal, right? Anyways, plastic, doesn't necessarily have to be the enemy. By the way, a way of thinking of it, we should think it as a precious thing. There is so much plastic, and it's such a cool thing to have, that we should reuse it and reuse it and reuse it so many times, because it's so, it's a perspective that will go with consumism, probably, or attached to it. I don't know if it would make sense, but precious plastic.
That's a good reframe of it. It's a precious thing. We should reuse it and not just throw it away. Because I'm telling you, we saw it there on the islands. So, the Doc Joe Show revolves around the I am approach. So all of this is saying we're always doing the best we can. We're influenced by our home domain, our social domain, the biological domain, and the I see, how we see ourselves, how we think other people see us. Because it's small domains, these 4 domains interconnect, a small change can have a big effect. You don't need to change everything. So I'm going to ask each of you individually. Dani, we'll start with you. What small change can you recommend to our listeners so that they have a better understanding, perhaps, about our role in the world.
Yeah, for me, it would be like to look closer. I mean, for me, it was something like that. For example, today I was lucky that I just I was outside my home. I just look to the sky, and there were two like hawks flying around. I didn't know we like could see hawks from my house, but yes, if you look closely, like there's lots of things that can amaze you, and you can start to see like different things.
That's great. Bernie, what about you? Small changes can have big effects. What small change can you recommend to our listeners?
That's a good one. I don't know. So we human beings are here on Earth, for thriving. That's what every species, goal actually ends up being. But anyways, I believe that it would be very important that people, probably do like at least some like 30 minutes of exercise a day. Basically because of the importance of, understanding the separation between our body and our minds and whatever else, right? But anyways, at least body and mind, two different things, that we shall understand, as different things. And that's because I actually want to improve my surfing a lot. And so I've been actually training a lot, doing skateboarding and stuff. And I've been sort of understanding how are actually so different things, but can be so controllable and they can work together so well. I think that would be very important that people start exercising, and exercising, triggers the fact of getting to expose your body, to physical demand, and at some point that will probably help you to understand your body. I would say, and it's also healthy, it gets your mind also kind of eased.
So being aware and exercising, and then I just want to say that the second rule is you control no one, you influence everyone. And I think the two of you have been the most amazing influence on so many of us because you have taught us really to appreciate what we have in this world and to take care of it. Folks, thanks so much for coming tonight all the way from Ecuador, Galapagos, Dani and Bernie. Thank you so much. Folks, you can go to the Galapagos yourselves. It's worth it. See you all next week.